Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And this is a Patreon voted on video. The idea of 10 games I love but I don't talk about a lot, or some version of that title. And to quote a Patreon who asked the question, well, if you love them, why don't you talk about them a lot? And it's because there's lots of games. There are hundreds and hundreds of games coming out every single year. Forget what already exists in the vast library of Board Game Geek and the general board game universe. And so almost every single one of these games I have talked about at some point or another. If nothing else, they may have ended up in my top 50 games of 2020. They may have shown up in different lists. Dominion, for a fact, I know for a fact this game has shown up in a list or two here and there. But I haven't talked about them a lot. The video isn't called games I haven't talked about at all. That would be a shorter list and probably have very few games that I love. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump on into it, starting off with Dominion, which I didn't pull off from off camera because this thing is chock full of, well, all of this. When I say I love Dominion, I mean I love Dominion. I have, well, not everything for the game because I don't have like the last two expansions, partially because I don't feel I need them and partially because I don't even know where I'd put them. I need one of those Hobby Lobby cases where you can put your Dominion collection. If you've seen that online, you know what I'm talking about. But that's kind of a tangent to Dominion. Dominion is a game from Donald X. Victorino, and it is a game that, it is the grandfather of deck building games, or the father of deck building games. It's the original deck builder, the one that made the genre popular. I don't know if it was the first of its kind. I don't know what the first deck builder actually would have been. I know Mage Knight is pretty early in deck building. I don't know what the first deck builder is, but I think Dominion is the one that for a long time was associated with deck building. This is a game where the general idea of it is build out your deck. The general idea of it is just build out a deck, build out an engine. You're going to have a pool of 10 cards to pick from, plus, of course, the common cards. And you're going to be trying to build up enough of an engine that you can then start gathering all the point cards. See, the problem is the point cards clog your deck. You need them to eventually win, but if you go for them too early, you're decreasing the efficiency of your engine as you go, which generally results in two kinds of playstyles. People who know when to predict the endgame and start going for the cards, and then people like myself who keep building your engine a turn too long, having a blast at the game, but rarely winning at Dominion. And Dominion for me is one of my favorite deck builders after all the deck builders I have gone through. And I've gone through a lot of deck builders. In fact, there's at least one other deck builder on this video today. But there are a lot of other deck builders I've gone through, and I like many deck building games. I like the concept of building out an engine as you play. And yet Dominion for me has a few things that to this day make it still one of my favorite deck builders. A game that I very much recommend, although understand that when you spend $30 to $40 buying a copy of Dominion, you're not getting what you have in here. This is like $300, $400 worth of Dominion. All the expansions, or most of the expansions, all bundled together. But Dominion has a few things that I like. It has that common pool of cards, as opposed to a moving card line. I've never loved quite as much moving card lines in deck builders. I enjoy some of them, but I enjoy it despite that aspect. I like the idea of having a common pool of cards where from the very get-go, from the very beginning of the game, you and I have to sit there and try to figure out what engine we're building, and it doesn't come down to the luck of the draw as to which cards enter the row as it's my turn to buy something, and I kind of want to buy a card, but none of the cards currently available actually work together with my engine, and so I don't feel as in control. Now, there's luck either way in deck building, obviously. The cards that come up, the order they come up in. But overall, Dominion, at the end of the day, is one that it gives you so many options. It gives you so much variability. It is clean and to the point in what it's doing. Some of the expansions do add degrees of complexity that aren't necessarily worth the payoff, but I end up just playing without those cards. I go through this box, I pick out the cards that work together in some way, just rapidly grabbing a few decks, set it up, and then I have a near infinitely variable experience just based on the sheer amount of content I have. Dominion is a game that I absolutely love, and I don't talk about as much as I should. And from there, let's move to Gentes. I think it's Gentes. It might be Gentes. This is a game from Steven Risthaus. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. This is from TMG and Game Brewer. It's a deluxe-fied game, and since it's from TMG, that means these may be harder and harder to get, or at least the deluxe-fied version of it. I don't know what's going to be going on. TMG, if you don't know, is currently kind of having some problems, and They're basically not really selling any games because, well, problems, financial issues and all that, which means any game they've put out, from Yokohama to Gentes, from who knows what's currently available, most of them are going to be harder to get. Now, Orleans did sell to Capstone, so that's available. This is a tangent to what's going on here. Gentes is going to be a reverse worker placement game. Effectively, it's worker placement, but it's not really done under the guise of worker placement. Rather, you're taking pieces off the board rather than putting them onto the board. But the net and end result is the same as you play this game. Now, the reason I love Gentes so much, first of all, the reason I don't talk about it as much as I should is because I don't play it as much as I'd like to. So it's one of those games that ends up on my shelf and it's not top of mind. It's not a game I'm constantly thinking of. I don't even think this one made its way into my top 50 of all time. I have to double check, but I don't think it did. I'm 90% sure Dominion did. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. Did I not put it in my top 50? It should go in my top 50. But then what would I take out? Either way, Gentes is a game that I love this game. It is so ridiculously well executed on, and yet it's a little bit to jump into, but not that much once you realize it's just worker placement. Now, it has an interesting mechanic in the game that I particularly enjoy, where you're going to have these different workers, basically, you're leveling up, but you can only level them up so far, because once you level up to a certain point, you're pushing them back. You see, every worker comes in one of two types, and the total can add up to 7. So you can have, pushing one along the track, but then eventually it's going to start pushing the other one down. So you're trying to balance the strength of your relative workers, which is all relevant because of the cards you're trying to acquire that will require your workers to be at different points. So you're balancing the economy of your nation as you build it up, while balancing the strength of your actions while you go to different areas on the board, all while trying to accomplish and get different tableau building aspects in this game. It is a bit of an odd duck in the way it's built out, and yet it's beautiful to begin with. I mean, this game is absolutely beautiful, but more importantly, it's just a solid game. It's a solid Euro game, one that isn't talked about quite as much as I would think it should, but then again, the nature of it being on this list means I'm contributing to that problem. From there, we have Navegador. Now, I've talked about a bunch of Max Gertz games before. I've talked about Concordia a lot. Concordia is an excellent game, but not eligible for this video because I talk about it a decent amount. Then there's also going to be, he has Antique Duella, more antique as well. Both solid games. He has the Imperial line, which I kind of want to jump back into and give another shot, but my one experience with Imperial I didn't love so far. But this game, Navegador, is going to be one of his less talked about games, and yet no less elegant for being less talked about. Navegador is going to have a degree of trying to, well, not really colonize, I guess maybe you are, I don't know, but you're kind of making your ships, you're making your way down this path with your ships, trying to slowly get up different areas on the board, while also trying to get your way all the way to the end. You're going to be, I guess you are colonizing, you are going to be building up different plantations or gathering different types of plantations as you try to figure out the market in the game. It's a combination of a bit of a race along with a market. Now, it has his typical Rondel aspect of trying to figure out which actions to take, which order, how you're going to build up your engine in this game. But it's all about trying to move your ships along, get to the end, figure out your economy, manipulate the market, try to sell this when you want to sell that, well, that's said poorly. Try to sell things when the market is high at different points, trying to build up the different aspects. There's two sides to the market at the same time. There's the factories as well as the colonies. You're trying to take all that into account in this game. Navegador is an excellent game from Max Gertz, one that I don't play as often as I should. Well, I guess that's relative because I do like Concordia more, but I do like Navegador a lot. From there, let's go to the Quest for El Dorado, another game that is a deck builder. This is going to be the other deck builder I was talking about when I said I was going to be talking about other deck builders. Now, the Quest for El Dorado is going to be a Reina Knizia game that I have all the expansions, and I haven't really pulled out the expansions yet because I haven't felt the need to, although I really do want to play with the expansions. You see, the Quest for El Dorado is going to be a racing game. It's a deck-building racing game. You're going to build out your different pathways in this game. It's going to be near infinitely variable as you just choose the various large tiles and then combine them. Now, the game does have some pre-configured maps that you might want to look at, but once you get a feel for how the game works, once you get a feel for how the maps work, you'll actually be able to build out your own pathways in the game. But from there, it comes down to the deck building aspect of building out the way you're going to race through the map. Now, this is another one that, like Dominion, has a fixed market of cards. There's no randomness of what's going to come up at different points. There is a degree of unlocking cards, of figuring out which cards will unlock at different points, allowing you to control the market and build out your engine the way you want. But in the game, like many deck builders, it comes down to how efficiently you're going to weed your deck. Are you going to weed your deck? Well, it also depends on how long the map is. That's another factor you want to consider. The longer the map you build, the more important it is to weed your deck early. Now, you can weed your deck through cards you acquire. You can weed your deck by going to different locations in the game. There's a bunch of options on the table, although you don't have to weed your deck. But whether or not you weed your deck is one conversation, and for those who don't know, weeding your deck means taking out the cards that are less efficient, so you can constantly be cycling the better cards as you play through this game. But past that, do you want to go more economy-based? Do you want to go more movement-based? What does the map look like? How much water is there? How much plant is there? How many villages are there? What are the actions you're going to take as you go through the game? Maybe you're going to try to block people off at that one critical juncture where you can get past because you have that 4 money card, but no one else can, so you will take your sweet time as people pile up behind you, hoping to get past, begging for you to finally move, but you take your time building out your deck because you have the money card anyway, so you can build out the more efficient deck. I love Quest for Dorado. It is fast-paced. It's a game that plays in 30 to 45 minutes. It's a game that plays well at 2, 3, and 4 players. It is one of my favorite deck-building games, and this is one of the newer ones on the list. From there, we have Parks. Parks is going to be from Keymaster Games, and this is one that I heard a lot of good things. Now, by the way, this one I did debate whether to include, because I think I have potentially talked about this one a bit more than some other games on this list. But Parks is a game from Keymaster Games that I very much love. I enjoy this game, and it plays well at 2, 3, and 4 players. I'd argue 4 players can be a little tighter and potentially run a little longer, but still plays well at 4. I think for me, 3 is the sweet spot in this game, giving me the player interaction I want with the game length I want, although again, 2 and 4 is also a game I'd happily play it at. Now, Parks is a game that is deceptive in the sense that it looks like a lighter game. When you read the rules, and even when you play it, it might come across as a lighter game, but it is anything but a lighter game. Parks is a game that is brutal in its execution if you're playing it tactically, if you're playing it with the intent to, well, win and to be cutthroat about it. It's not a game about doing what you want the best. It's about a game about getting in your opponent's ways most efficiently. How can I simultaneously move my hiker along the path in a way that's going to frustrate you, but still work for me? When will I flip my campfire to be able to take another action to move forward? How will I try to choose when and where to execute upon my movement, upon which tiles I land on, upon which abilities I try to go for, upon the engine I'm building, whether I'm going more for photos, am I going for the various landscape cards? Ultimately, the game is all about moving your hiker, collecting resources, getting to the end of the trail, and then visiting the park you want. That's all it really is on the surface. But it's much more than that. It very much is about trying to figure out the best way to get in each other's ways, the best times to jump a little bit ahead to get to that tile that you want, even though it might mean giving up a few actions, but that's okay because you have a hiker behind you and you have a campfire that hasn't been flipped yet, so you still have the flexibility that you need or want, and now you can spend the rest of the round getting in your opponent's ways. I love Parks. It is tactical, it is brutal, it is mean, it is viciously well done as a game. Speaking of tactical, brutal, and mean, we have Watergate. Watergate by Capstone Games. Did I have another Capstone Games? No, I was talking about Orleans. That's why I'm thinking Capstone, because they bought the rights for Orleans. But Watergate is going to be one of the better 2-player games that has come out in the past few years. Watergate from Capstone Games is going to be a game mimicking the story of Watergate, the idea that one player will be playing as Nixon, and one player will be playing as the press. Now, the goal of the game is to try to figure out, well, as Nixon, you're trying to outlast your opponent. You're trying to gain enough momentum and gain enough public support before the press can track you down and pinpoint the various points of how you were responsible for Watergate. On the other hand, as the press, you're trying to pin down your opponent. You're trying to pin down Nixon. So every round is going to have a degree of putting out evidence markers and putting out momentum, and then spending your cards, your energy, your movements fighting for those things. Because Nixon wants the momentum and the press wants the evidence. But you have to be watching your opponents, because if you let Nixon get the momentum, he'll win. If you let the press get the evidence, they'll win. So you're constantly going for the thing you want while trying to put up enough barriers and blockers in the way of your opponents to ensure that you get what you want before they get what they want. And then the evidence board, which is this ridiculously simple little board they have in the game, it doesn't seem like it would work, but it does work. It does have just enough nuance of the colors on the table, of the colors and the positioning and the tactical movement you're going to have along that evidence board as you collect the informant to Nixon in the center. But you have to do that with 2 different informants. One will not be enough. So you're playing this interesting game of just trying to know your cards, know when to play them. And that's a big part of the game, because the game comes with 2 asymmetric decks, both with different abilities that will either be one-time use and then remove the card from the game, a little bit of deck weeding in and of itself there, or alternatively cards that might be better to hold on to use not for their ability, and to keep them a little longer, which might be the right move, but also might not be, depending on the card and the moment at time that you choose to use it. There's a lot of tactical depth going on in Watergate, and it's a game that, in my opinion, only gets better the more you play it. From there, we have For Sale. For Sale is an older game, but one that has managed to survive purge after purge after purge in my collection. This is a fairly simple game, but a well-done simple game. It's a game in which there are two phases in the game. The first phase results in, well, there's 30 property cards at play, and they're going to be playing out different property cards as players bid to get those properties. You're going to try to bid, because if you get that 30, that could be very helpful in the second phase, but there's also properties of value 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 30, and so you're trying to decide how much to bid at any different point to get a variety of properties into your hand. Because then you get up to the second phase, where now you have your properties, and depending on the player count, whatever it is, you maybe have 5 properties or whatever, and you're trying to figure out, okay, great, now we have the money, and the money's coming out. And so you see a bunch of money cards come out ranging between values between 0 and 15. And then players blind put down their property as they sell their property, trying to get the highest money card. So having that 30 property can be incredibly useful because you can guarantee that 15 money card when it comes out. Having the 29 property might seem like you can guarantee it, but maybe it's not the right time to play it because someone else will be playing their 30 property. You're trying to get the highest property so you can sell them for the highest amount of money, but the higher the property, the more guarantee or the more control you have over getting that money you need. It's a game of reading your opponents as much as it is about the economy of when to bid, when to not bid, when to hold off, when to sit there and say, I'll just take that one. There are a lot of fun decisions in this game. It is really well done. I love For Sale. It's one that doesn't hit the table as much as I'd like nowadays, but it has survived purge after purge after purge for a reason. Next up, we have Rum and Bones Second Tide from Come. Now, Rum and Bones is a game that I don't talk about all that much because it doesn't hit the table all that much, but it's one that when it does hit the table, man, do I love this game. Rum and Bones is going to be a 2-player. Now, there's a 4-player mode, but it's primarily a 2-player game. Rum and Bones is going to be a 2-player skirmish game where if you have all the content, which I have all the content, you will have 1,000,000 pirates to play with. 1,000,000 pirates, each with their own asymmetric abilities, and you're going to draft a team, a crew of 3 pirates per team, although ideally it's from your specific faction, although there's also mercenaries. Whole bunch of things. Rest assured, there's lots of pirate combinations to be had. You'll also pick your faction, which will determine both the ship you have in play, as well as the various extra cards you have, and from there it comes down to trying to, well, attack each other and trying to get more points than your opponent, and possibly taking out the Kraken as well, because there's going to be a variety of ways to get points. There's going to be attacking different ship features, there's going to be taking out your opponents, there's going to be defeating the Kraken in this game, and every single one of your pirates, it's going to be a MOBA is the term they use. It's a MOBA game. It's going to be a game where you're going to have swarms of pirates attacking each ship, and you can take out those little swarms, getting gold, which will then be used to upgrade your abilities. You can attack your opponents, which will be helpful, but also a lot more risky because wading into battle against your opponents will likely result in death, assuming they're playing it correctly and you're not, or at least early on in the game. Now, once your pirates are all leveled up, once you have your powers at your disposal, once you're throwing a hook against one pirate, yanking him towards you, using your other pirate to blow off his head with a shotgun, there are fun, epic moments in this game, and there's also moments where you're going to jump from one ship to the next and land in the water again and again and again because you can't stop rolling ones. It's kind of ridiculous, but it will happen to you in this game. Rum and Bones Second Tide is both thematic, it has powers and abilities left, right, and center. The only reason it doesn't hit the table as much as I'd like is because it is a longer 2-player game. It's going to be 2 hours or so in that range for a 2-player game, which for me means it won't hit the table as much as I would like. But when it does, I am reminded why I have 2 full Calyx cubbies full of this game and all the expansions. There is so much good content for Rum and Bones. It's truly a game that I love and don't talk about as much as I should. From there, we have Rajas of the Ganges. Rajas of the Ganges, which is a game that I believe I do talk about, but not necessarily as much as I'd like either. Now, this is a game where I actually just got Rajas of the Ganges Dice Charmers, a game that I have been enjoying, but Rajas of the Ganges is going to be the big brother and a better game than Dice Charmers. Dice Charmers gives you much of the same experience at a shorter playtime, but it's not Rajas of the Ganges. This is actually a game that I got rid of after playing it initially. I played it, I thought it was fun, but didn't stick with me enough, and eventually I moved on from it, but then I had second thoughts about this one and got it back. And like a mere handful of games in my collection, it's a game that I had second thoughts, got back, and has stuck around ever since. This is a game where you're going to be rolling tons of dice, and it's going to have worker placement as you put out your various, well, dice and people in the various spots in the game to try to build up your economy in this game. Your economy is going to come from dice, but it's ultimately comes down to managing your fame and your money, because this game has an interesting mechanism where it's not having the most fame, it's not having the most money, it's about having your fame and your money cross. So you can go heavy on money and light on fame. You can go light on money and heavy on fame. But really what's most important is that you have one going fast around the track, or perhaps both, but balance your objectives accordingly. Now, you can get tons of fame if you build up your buildings in your side tableau. That could be very helpful. Level up your buildings and keep building buildings on your little side track. Awesome, that's great. Or you can manage your economy by trying to get as many goods as possible and manage your money that way, selling goods after goods after goods. There are many, many different tricks and tips as far as how you can balance getting as much fame and money in this game. And then there's the river. Going up the river as you try to get all the different rewards on the river. This is a game that is beautiful, first of all. It's just generally beautiful. The dice are very, very deluxeified, or, you know, just hordes of colorful dice in this game. Lots of fun things going on in Raja of the Ganges. It is one that is probably the newest game on this list. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But new or not, it is an amazing experience. And then lastly, number 10 on this list is going to be an older game, but an older game that I very much recommend. It's going to be Lancaster. Lancaster is an older game. This is going to be a Queen's Game game. Now, Queen's Game is going to be a company that has a ton of games. They're the Reiner Knizia of publishing. Reiner Knizia is going to be a designer who has, well, he's actually, by the way, Referral Dorado is Reiner Knizia. But Reiner Knizia has a ton of games under his belt, and so many of them are amazing, and so many of them are, in my opinion, forgettable. Now, Queen Games as a publisher has that same problem. They have a ton of forgettable games, but they have some real classics on their hands, and Lancaster is one of those classics. This is a game where you're going to be, well, it's worker placement, but it's a worker placement game where you have only a handful of workers. You start the game with 2 workers that you're going to be putting on the board trying to figure out, and you only have 4 rounds to build up your system. And it constantly feels like you'll never have enough choices as far as actually being able to build everything up. I'm somebody who, half the time when I play games, I'm like, I want one more round. I want this game to last one more round. I want it to just to get a little bit more done. But in Lancaster, I feel that it's the perfect length. It doesn't feel like it would be the perfect length, and every time you start it, you feel like you won't get enough done. But whether you're fighting battles, whether you're upgrading your workers, whether you're adding more workers, and then the fun of the game, the part that I absolutely adore about this game is going to be the aspect of placing your workers in a way to knock your opponent's workers out of place. You'll be doing so. You'll be buffing up your workers in order to push them down, knocking your opponents out, and balancing that as the game goes on. The more you play this game, this is a game where it's not about going where you want to go. It's a game about going where you don't want to go. It's a game about trying to figure out, how can I place my worker here so that he'll be knocked out, and then I can go where I actually want to go before the round is up. But perhaps, just perhaps, they're going to actually leave my worker there, so you have to balance that in this game. I love the decisions it gives you, I love the upgrading Lancaster gives you, and I love the amount of content that the big box gives you in terms of mixing up your gameplay experience. And every round you're going to be voting on different laws, so that's another thing you want to juggle. You're going to have voting markers you're going to be earning, and you can vote to try to figure out which laws are going to be the most beneficial to impact, affecting who's going to get points for different things. You want to ensure that you're working with others, because being the best at one thing will usually result in the laws you want being voted down. But being very good at one thing along with somebody else such that you'll both benefit from a law usually means you'll be acting in alignment with others, and you're going to need their help as you play Lancaster. It is a solid game that I do not see talked about a lot at all by really anyone, and it's such a good experience. It's not going to be El Grande. El Grande is a game I talk about more because I think El Grande is more elegant, better, and, well, amazing. But Lancaster is a very close second that is just a solid experience all around. That's going to be it. That's going to be the top 10 games that I love that I don't talk about as much as I should. There are more games I could have picked for this list. There were dozens of games. Not dozens. There were more games I was eyeing, but I tried to keep this list down to only 10. In any case, whatever I missed, let me know. If there's another game you've seen in my collection that you think I should be talking about more, that you think is that amazing, let me know. I'm curious what else I may have missed that I actually played. There's a lot of good games out there, and they don't all get the YouTube time that they deserve. Until next time, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.